Power.
Wow. Today Sonoma, tomorrow the world. Holy cow. This is great. Now we really have to be careful. I don't even know what I'm doing. So I'd like to call to order the council meeting for Wednesday, September 5th, 6 p.m. Could I actually call for a roll call? Right? The pledge. All right, I'm sorry. I'm just amazed with the sound. I will lead us in a pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, team, for helping me run the meeting. Oh, God, this is so exciting. So now, please, roll call.
Councilmember Cook,
Here.
Vice Mayor Harrington,
Present.
Councilmember Henley,
Here.
Councilmember Edwards,
Yes.
Mayor Agramonte.
Here,
Thank you.
I would like, we had no closed session, so there's no report on that. And at this point, I'd like to have an approval of the agenda, please.
So moved.
Second.
May I have a roll call?
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Henley,
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. So all items listed on the consent calendar are, pardon?
Public comment.
I knew that. Well, where is it here? Grande. Thank you. I'm opening for public comment.
I hope my mic works as good as yours. Ken Brown, 1396 Lubeck Street in the beautiful town of Sonoma. I watched the Planning Commission meeting this morning on SVTV. Grateful that they're there and providing that service. Your chair and the attorney present did an excellent job, and I already extended my compliments. They're working hard for you. We're going to have a healing circle on the plaza behind City Hall. It starts at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning. Many things have happened and continue to happen in Sonoma, the nation, and the world. And a healing would be a good place to start. And the plaza is a recognized power spot in the world. So I hope I see you there. And I have to also say that I'm looking forward to the next city council meeting where cannabis will be a prominent discussion. We provided you with lots of materials. I hope you check it out and be reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alejandra Cervantes, ALEJANDRACERVANTES. I live in 18629 Boys Hot Springs, 18629 Highway 12 in Boys Hot Springs. And I just come to invite pues the whole town and everybody to the celebration of Mexican Independence Day. Is already here at the corner. And especially to you, if you want to represent the city with us, especially at 4 p.m., that is when we have the civic ceremony with the representation of the Consulate of Mexico from San Francisco.
Muchas gracias. What is the date, Alejandra?
It's Sunday the 16th. And we open at 2 p.m. until 7 p.m. We have a band for dancing from 5 to 7.
And donde? Donde?
It's at the beautiful Sonoma Plaza in the heart of our town. So, and we'll be very happy to have you with enjoying our beautiful event. Thank you so much.
You can give it to the city clerk.
Hi, my name is Regina Baker, live on First Street West. I attended the Planning Commission meeting last night, and it was quite interesting. The disappointment was that after nearly a year and a half, they still haven't resolved traffic and or the residential addition to it. So I kind of think that if they don't include the residential, that the residents of Sonoma will be quite irritated with them. I know that you don't have anything to do with that at this time, but they need to be encouraged to try to fit it in. If you have any influence on any of them, especially the developer, they kind of just want to ignore it. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Baker.
David Eicher, E-I-C-H-A-R, and 1110 Loma Court. And I'm glad we have the public comment period in general, and I'm not sure why you no longer have it at special meetings. I know it's not required like it is at regular meetings, and other cities in Sonoma do have public comments during the special meetings as well, so I hope that you can bring that back. I too attended the Planning Commission last night, and one of the things, I'm not going to get much into the EIR and all that now, but one of the themes there, which all of you have talked about, is housing, workforce housing, affordable housing, and we do need more of that of housing within the city of Sonoma and outside as well. And what I've seen though is that people seem to not want it near me, not want it here. I want put it over there, because those people, I don't want them near me. And at first I thought when this kind of theme came up, it was one time during a meeting where someone mentioned opponents to Shock and Hill and the people that supported it. And they were talking about the developer said, we have quality people, not quantity. That was insulting to me. Last night there was something similar. And I thought that was just an anomaly, just one person is not, all the rich. But one other person who lives in a house worth $3.4 million said this about putting housing where the hotel is. This is not the right location. I don't want to spend $500 a night, look across a breezeway, and see some guy with no shirt drinking Corona watching America's Got Talent. That's just wrong in all sorts of reasons. It's stereotyping, it's degrading, it's insulting. Please don't let emotional pleas like that get in the way of doing the right thing and making sure we have the workforce housing we need here in the places where it does the most good in terms of greenhouse gas and vehicle miles traveled, and for the people that, the firefighters, the teachers that need the housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eicher. Would you like to speak?
I'm not sure. I think we're on the agenda. Can we speak now or wait until it, pardon? Okay.
Well, this is only for items that are not on the agenda.
Oh, we're not on the agenda? Okay. All right. Then I have something for the council members.
Are there, oopsie, go ahead.
Hi. I'm part owner of 18766 8th Street East, Hamlin Road. 4 acres. It's approved for self-storage. And what we're looking...
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? What is your name?
Mike Larbre.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
sorry. Thanks. What we're looking for is an OSA for water hookup. And I've met with individual council members, explained the position. We have, for the council members, letters from Chief Mullis, who's requesting the hookup to city water, and it's for primarily fire suppression. Although our potable water use is going to be very minimal with 1 employee bathroom, xeriscape landscape. So the water use on the site is going to be very minimal. We're also much more reliable for firefighting reasons with the supply of city water versus a private system hooked up with a backup electric or diesel pump, tanks, well, etc. The runoff during the winter, we will be retaining in tanks on the property as per PRMD, Sonoma County, for use with the landscape. And the type of landscape we'll be using, like I said, very low water use, and that will be minimal on our consumption from the city. I also understand that GSA is looking to meter existing wells, stop the development of new wells. So we'll be obviously backing away from a well if we're able to hook into the city system for this use. Numerous adjacent properties to us are all hooked up to the city services. In fact, every one of them, the warehouses at 19800 8th Street, stored all self-storage, 19784. The city corporate yard, they're their own island, they're city limits. The county corporate yard is also on city water. So the fact that the water main actually runs down Hamlin Road and traverses our property, it implies that it'd be fair for us to hook into it, pay the hookup fee, no additional cost to the city or ratepayers. We pay the infrastructure to hook up to it. So those are my main points that I wanted to raise with it. And I hope that you'll consider that and grant us a water hookup for this thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward?
Yeah, I'm Rob Sherwood, 480 Denmark Street. I'm Mike's partner on the project. And as Mike said, it's a unique situation. We've spoken to several people individually in the past. We talked to Dan Tasugi and the past Carol. And there was a concern about opening up the floodgates and everybody wanting to hook up to city water. But our situation is a little unique in that the city pipe does go through our property, which we believe implies the reason that happened is because at some point in the future, we would be allowed to hook up. And so the city pipe being in our property puts us in kind of a unique situation. In 2016, Ray Mullis was kind enough to write a letter on our behalf to Carol and Dan, which we have copies of that letter, requesting that we be granted it for life and safety reasons. And he said that if there was ever a fire there, he would in fact hook up to the hydrant that's on the corner of Helga Bruckner's property in order to put a fire out. But certainly if there is going to be fire suppression, which is required by the county now for all new buildings, we'd have a sprinkler system. If we weren't able to hook up to the city, we'd end up having a diesel pump that we would have to run, which we have at another location off-site, that we have to periodically run. It runs for a half hour. It's quite noisy. It adds to pollution. And there's a limited amount of water when you have a private system as opposed to the city system. When you have a fire, you want all the water you need, and that's what the city would provide. We got another letter from Ray Mullis, which I don't, did you give him copies, Mike? Yeah. Which was this year in February to both Kathy and Colleen Ferguson, making a similar request. And as far as the other gentleman said about workforce housing, part of our project, we have to pay $200,000 towards workforce housing. Economically, it would help us greatly not to have to put in a private system with redundancy, a diesel pump, and as Mike said earlier, we would be using a very minuscule amount of water. It's a self-storage project. It's not manufacturing, and it would, as Mike's bullets point out, forestall a much greater development that could ultimately use more water and add a much more intrusive use. Mini storage, the property is zoned M3, is about the minimal, least impactful use. We'll have approximately 1.5 employees, FTEs, 1.5. And as his bullets also point out, it's all going to be zero-scape. So after the first year, watering would be minimal. So we hope that you'll consider granting us the OSA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sherwood. Is there anyone else who would like to step forward and speak? Seeing none, David.
Yeah, I had a question for the city manager. I have been contacted by a lot of different individuals, and if you could explain a little bit about the moratorium that we have for outside hookups. I think we have 450 outside hookups at this point. If you could, and what the process would be for the city if we decided to take a look at that, and when.
So the city council approved a moratorium for any outside water service beyond what currently is provided. I apologize, I don't have the date with me, and so I don't. But it's been in place for quite some time. I want to say maybe 2009. And so I can check that date for you. So the council set a policy. So the only way that could change would be for council to revisit that policy. I think the position of staff in the past has been, while this is one situation that may make some not only intuitive sense but practical sense, there are a number of folks that are on that 8th Street East corridor that would be very interested in city water. And so if council wants to look at potentially providing or being a conveyor of water for 8th Street East, that is a bigger conversation and one that council would need to say that you'd like to have agendized. And the way we do that kind of process now is through our quarterly agenda process. We have one of those. We'll be bringing a quarterly agenda planning process to our next council meeting on September 17th. So if the council wanted to entertain a conversation about that, you could have a brief conversation. And then we as staff could spend a little time to bring back kind of what a process would be, et cetera. So does that answer your question, Councilmember Cook?
Yes, thank you.
Just one additional thing to keep in mind, that all outside service agreements require the approval of the local agency formation commission as well.
Yes, and I do believe right now that if there is a pure kind of life and safety issue that can't be solved like through a well or in another situation, then the applicant can apply through LAFCO and go through that process. And those happen rarely, but they do happen on occasion, and then we will serve. So I can't speak to the specifics of this circumstance.
Thank you.
Well, it's interesting because I have spoken to Mr. Sherwood and Mr. Larbre, and it seems very practical to me what you're offering. And in fact, David and I sort of entered in discussions with respect to something similar to what you were offering. And it turned into a big hornet's nest, just all the issues, not necessarily specifically yours, but all the agencies that are involved. So I think that we looked into some of this information, but I don't know what the pleasure of the council is, but I'd certainly like to move to hear that.
So it's not appropriate for council to bring it up or agendize it tonight. The time, if council wants to talk about this issue or add anything else to, your future agenda, that would be at our quarterly agenda planning, which will be before the meeting of the September 17th. So 2 weeks from now, it would be coming.
So then the city clerk will make a note? Whomever will, that would be great.
Or a council member would bring it up. We'll lay out kind of what we currently have in process. We'll talk about some of the kind of constraints and time focus the city currently has. And then a council member can bring it up. And if there's interest, the way the process is, so let's just say that Councilmember Cook brought it up at that meeting and would like to see it maybe preliminary agendized at the September 17th during the agenda planning, that he would need to have a majority from the council, and then we would take that majority direction and move forward in terms of beginning to understand what that is in terms of this issue and the larger issue. Any questions about that?
Sounds like a good thing for us to just move forward on and take a look at. Thank you. Now I have meeting dedication. Does anybody have a meeting dedication? No? Well, I do. Her name, Bernadine Ada Friedel, known as Bernie. She was a women's club member for over 30 years. And in fact, I attended a celebration of her life on Sunday. She had 3 brothers, Edward, Eugene, and David, and was married to Gilbert Russell, who was killed in action in 1945. And they had 3 children, Gilbert Jr., Donald, and Ronald. And I just wanted to mention her name. I think it's very important. She was a big part of our community, volunteered at the Sonoma League for Historic Preservation. She's in the Sonoma Bookstore, Fish as a driver, and over a 30-year plus member of the Sonoma Women's Club, Bernie Ada Friedel. So I'd like to turn it over to the city manager.
Great. Mayor Agramonte, members of the City Council, it is my pleasure to introduce some new members of our city staff team. This is something that we haven't historically done, but kind of a new tradition. A couple times a year as we have new staff, I'd like to bring them and introduce them to both the council and the community. So I'd like to start with Miss Jenna Burrows, and if Jenna would stand up and come up to the podium. So I am thrilled to introduce Jenna. Jenna is our new Deputy Finance Director in our Finance Administrative Services Department. And as council recalls, this was a reorganization we did over the last year to kind of realign some of the structure and staffing we had in finance. And Jenna successfully competed for this Deputy Finance position, and she will be overseeing all of our finance operation, working under Sue Casey, our Assistant City Manager. And Jenna comes from the Calistoga Joint Unified School District, where she was the Director of Business Services. She has a Master of Accountancy in Governmental Accounting from Rutgers University and a BS in Ag and Business Accounting from Chico State, and has got over 10 years of accounting and finance experience, and really solid accountant, great manager, good communicator. I'm looking forward to having her present to all of you and work with you individually. She grew up in Yountville, 5th generation, now lives in Napa with her 2 children and husband, and she's a softie for animals, and regularly adopts rescue animals, including what she says a currently poorly behaved blind dog. So anyway, we're delighted to have Jenna with us and really welcome you.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Welcome, Jenna.
Welcome.
And then Ryan Kamada couldn't be with us tonight. Ryan is an accounting technician, also in our finance operation. We have 2 positions here, and Ryan's focus is on accounts payable, payroll, and special projects. And Ryan just has had a real can-do attitude. Anything you ask, he dives in, does it thoroughly, professionally. He's got a bachelor's degree from the University of Southern California and 20 years of accounting financial experience. He's worked for us for maybe 6 months or so as a contract temp employee, and then went through the competitive process and was the #1 candidate. So he's just been truly a delight. He was raised in Marin County, left to Southern California, and recently came back and lives in Novato with his wife and their golden retriever. It's an animal theme with our new employees. And so he's definitely into dog-friendly beaches and wineries and work in his backyard, but hopefully some of you will have a chance to meet him. And next I'd like to ask Christy Macy to walk up and be here. So Christy has been with us maybe about a month now, and is the administrative assistant in our building department. She works the front counter and really is one of those first points of customer service. And we're really lucky because she came from the town of Yountville and the county of Napa, having worked in a building department and has an experience, knows the business, and has really just jumped in and taken things forward. So it's just been a delight to have her on our team as well. She lives in Napa with her husband Brian and their 2 daughters, and she's another 5th generation Napa Valley resident. Enjoys being with her family outside and trying out cooking and gardening, etc. So we're delighted to have Christine with us as well.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to officially meet you all if I haven't yet.
Welcome, Christine.
So those are 3 new members. As council knows, I mean, we have a 35 employee workforce, so it's a small group and folks wear many hats and work hard. And so, it's important that we hire the right people and have the right talent, and delighted to bring these 3 forward and have them with us. So that's it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. That was a treat. So at this time, I'm going to the consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Is there any? I'll take it out to the public. Is there anything that anyone would like from the public to change? None. I'll bring it back to the council. Any suggestions?
Make a motion to approve the consent calendar, items 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and 4.4.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Argamonte?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
And now we're moving on to the regular agenda.
This is 6.1, consideration, discussion, and possible action to adopt a resolution making changes to the council, commission, and committee appointment policy.
Great, so I'll start and then hand off to our city clerk, Rebecca. As council knows, this was a major effort the last year to update and modify our commission appointment process. There are a couple of things that have come forward as we've worked with this that need to be clarified. One is that there is a youth commissioner, and rather than having that youth commissioner be at our regular times of a February start, it makes more sense for that person to be in that academic calendar. So we're looking at modifying the policy to be that the youth commissioner for the CSCC would start August 1 and go through July 31. And then also we wanted to be clear that to add in some language in section 4A4, which speaks to the terms of the individuals that are appointed to serve as commissioners on either the Group A or Group B, and that they coincide with the city council elections. So those were the primary changes made. Track changes are there, and either the city clerk and I are happy to answer any questions of the council.
Are there any questions from the city council? Thank you. Having none, I'd like to take that out to the public for any comments. Seeing no one rise to the podium, I'd like to bring it back to the city council.
I'd like to make a motion to approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma approving revisions to the Council, Commission, and Committee appointment policy.
Second.
May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. And now on to 6.2.
6.2, consideration, discussion, and possible action to make the following appointments. One, to the Cultural and Fine Arts Commission, the alternate, and the second is to the Community Services and Environment Commission, the non-voting youth member.
And I'm turning that over to City Manager.
So Mayor Agramonte, you have two candidates for each of these positions. Staff's recommendation is that if there's any questions to the council, you would ask them. Otherwise, go out to public comment, take public comment, come back, and then we will start with the Cultural and Fine Arts alternate position and just take them individually and look for motions for the council.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the council? Having none, I'd like to take it out to the public for any comments you may have. Seeing no one rise and approach the podium, I'll bring it back to the City Council and for the pleasure of the council. Have any questions?
So let's start off with the Cultural and Fine Arts Commission member first. There are two candidates, Troy Knox and Deborah Self. So if a council member is interested in making a motion, I think since there's only two candidates, we can just ask. If there were more, we would go through and ask you for each vote. But I think if there is a councilman would like to recommend one, we can see if there's agreement and otherwise go to an alternative motion.
Well, I think both of these candidates look like they'd be great additions, but I was inclined to support Troy Knox. However, I think the other candidate looks great too, so I guess it just depends on where my colleagues come on that.
I also was inclined to support Mr. Knox just because he's lived in the valley a little bit longer, and I think that Ms. Self has an outstanding resume, and it's great that she applied, and if there was another opening, she'd be a good pick, but I just thought that Mr. Knox has been here and worked with the schools and everything, that he'd be a good pick.
I concur.
And I concur.
I concur. I love that word. Thank you so much. So at this point, yeah, we need a motion.
I would like to make a motion to approve Troy Knox as as the alternate to the Cultural and Fine Arts Commission.
I'll second.
May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Hunley,
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards,
Yes.
Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. And now I move on to 6.3.
We have the youth member, Madam Mayor.
Pardon?
We have the youth member for the CSCC
right,
too.
sorry.
Sorry, two votes here. So you received two youth members, actually three, but one wasn't old enough, so there are two that are qualified that are with you. The first is Jacqueline Torres, and the second youth member is Arabella Davis.
Okay, so call for any questions regarding the candidates? Having none, I'd like to bring it out to the public. Thank you, Alejandra.
My name is Alejandra Cervantes, ALEJANDRACERVANTES, and I live in 18629 Highway 12. I highly recommend Jacqueline. I know her since she's a very little girl. So enthusiastic, so brave, and she just came back from a trip defending her. I don't know if that's the correct word, but for youth, and I think it will be a great addition if she could learn more from professionals in this field. So I highly, highly recommend her.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to share that information with the council? Seeing no one rise and approach the podium, I would like to close the public session and see what the pleasure of this council is.
So I'd like to see both on if we could, but apparently we can't do that. So I'll nominate Jacqueline Torres.
And I'll second that, and I appreciate both of you putting their applications in. I think that having the youth involved in this will be a great for Sonoma.
Thank you. At this point, we'll go for a roll call.
Okay, just
Is that a motion?
Oh, I'm sorry. We missed the motion, sorry.
Yeah, it was a very tough choice, and looking at this one, it seems that maybe there's other opportunities to have to provide for youth to have participation in some of our commissions, though. But very tough choice, but I will also support Ms. Jacqueline.
So I'm looking for a motion then, is that right? That's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I thought. Roll call. I'll repeat myself. Roll call.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Hi.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. And now I'm moving on to 6.3. Now I know why Mr. Smith is here.
Consideration.
Welcome.
Oops. Consideration, discussion, and possible action to adopt a resolution establishing administration citations for code enforcement.
Great. Mayor Agramonte and council, as council knows, we've been working on updating some of our tools, and administrative citation process is one of those. So council has already updated, with the help of our city attorney's office, John Abachi, working with our city prosecutor, code enforcement manager, Bob Smith, to go through and look at and update our ordinances. So that's been done. And then as part of that, we really wanted to go through and clarify and create administrative citations. So in the past, we have administrative hearings where if this is someone who's violated like a building permit or something that's a more permanent structure, we have a process we can go through. First, we always try to get voluntary compliance. We educate. After a series of letters that doesn't occur, then we code enforcement follows through. We do administrative hearing, and there we have fines that are set already in the code. What we don't have is for those more transitory types of activities that are quality of life issues that affect our town as well. For example, barking dogs, smoking in the plaza, those types of things that you can't go through a multi-month process to try to change someone's behavior. And so similar to a parking ticket, it's something that, you can give in the moment. So we have gone through and we've made some modifications because the basic fines within the code start at $100 for a first offense, $200 for a second, and $500 for a third. Working with Mr. Smith recommended a number of items that where we wanted to have a fine if someone wasn't voluntarily complying or being educated, but also not wanting that too much sticker shock, maybe is the right word for a fine. And so some of these fines, the first offense is $25, $50, and $100. They're meant to just remind folks that we're serious. We have these rules because we want to maintain the quality of life in our town, but they're not meant to be, I think, intentionally punitive because of the transitory nature. So Bob's got great experience. Some of these items that are listed here don't happen very often. Some we do get more complaints about. And again, this is something, part of what we've done in this is it's set up via resolution, not ordinance. So when we update our fines on an annual basis, if there's one that's not working or we want to make a change or something seems unfair, too high, too low, that can be changed in a very more streamlined process than an ordinance. If the items are not listed here separately, any other kind of administrative fines within our ordinance would be the standard 100, 200, or 500, or if we add items in add new regulations in the future. So with that, be happy to answer any questions, or if Bob, if you'd like anything to elaborate on.
No, I'm satisfied that this is appropriate tool for us to get compliance. I think as city manager indicated, I think there's a good purpose to be served by having lower fines on some of these first-time offenses. It's non-confrontational, but it's one step up above telling them for a second or third time, you got to put your cigarette out. So at $25, they start to get the message, and by the time they get to a second offense that they've actually been cited for, you'll probably get compliance.
Do I have any questions? Amy?
What's anti-scavenging?
Anti-scavenging is going through dumpsters and pulling stuff out of dumpsters.
Okay. My second question is,
So you have to stop that now, Amy.
no, it's going to be hard. How else are my kids going to eat dinner? For the tree ordinance, what does that mean? Does that mean chopping down a tree?
Right.
I think it should be higher. Because otherwise, if you want to cut it down, you might as well just pay the $100.
That's a good point. I'd have to check where defer to Veronica on this one, but I think the way our current fine structure is, that highest is the 100's highest we can go for a first offense.
Doesn't seem like a deterrent. I mean, if you have to go through the tree committee and you have a 100-year-old tree and they say you can't chop it down, and then you decide to do it, and then the fine is $100, why wouldn't you do it?
It's a good question. Some cities impose a damage of the tree provision that's a different fine. Now, one of the things that you can do relative to this is not charge it as an administrative citation. Change the municipal code and charge it as a higher,
You could charge it now
higher offense.
as a misdemeanor, and that raises the stakes considerably, because now you're talking about $500 fine, 6 months in jail.
So that would take it out of that category of what we're discussing right now?
We're not compelled to use the administrative citation procedure per se. In other words, it could be, there are multiple different remedies within the code, including a criminal citation to regular court as opposed to an administrative citation or a code enforcement action under the municipal code for a violation of the municipal code. So I think ultimately what Bob is trying to say is you could choose to cite it differently than under the administrative citation ordinance and have a significantly larger fine and the potential for jail time.
Who elects that? The city prosecutor?
Well, it would be at the direction of the, probably would be, in this case, it's interesting because right now the city prosecutors, we do not file on misdemeanors per se. Most of the misdemeanors that are not Sonoma Muni codes go up to the DA's office. So I'm assuming the DA would make the decision because the entire process for a misdemeanor would be initiated by a police report and a request for charges from the DA's office. So that's where they'd see it.
Okay, well, not at this moment, but we should probably consider figuring out how to make that enforceable in some real way instead of relying on the DA or a $100 fine. This doesn't seem like an effective deterrent.
We can, just in response to that, we can look at some of the options that are available relative to other tree ordinances and get back to the council.
So,
Gary?
quick question on TOT. Is that $100 plus whatever is owed?
Right.
Okay. And then what is telecommunications? What?
Some of these in here I've never dealt with, but telecommunications, I believe, has to do with their towers, placement of towers. I've read it. I can't recall, but it has to do with something to do with towers.
Great. Thank you.
I have a question. Is anybody else? Anyone? None? Could I ask Mr. Smith, with respect to this, what's your, what's the word? When people pay these fines, what's a percentage of that? Collections.
To the city,
Yes.
under this administrative code statutory structure, we have 100%.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you. And now I actually would like to turn it over to Councilmember Cook because you normally have something to say because there's no enforcement. I mean, isn't that you're okay with this? All right. Thank you. So at this point, thank you, Mr. Smith. I'll take it out to the public.
David Eicher, 1110 Loma Court. And I agree with Council Vice Mayor Harrington on the trees, because we had a tree blow over in the wind a few years back, and it wasn't a huge tall tree, maybe about a little bit higher than the ceiling, and about 2 foot in diameter, and it cost us $2,000 for them to cut it up. It's already down on the ground, and so if someone wants to cut a tree down, pay somebody $2,000, what's an extra $100 to? I was like, okay, I'll pay the extra $100 fine if I get caught. And so in terms of smoking on the plaza, I've had 2 occurrences at Tuesday night farmers market where people smoking on the plaza. And when we sat down, we chose a spot, and someone was smoking, and the wind changed slightly. I did go over and ask them to stop smoking, and they did, but I think they were at the end of the cigarette anyway. And a little while later, they lit up again. And then another evening, we went there to sit in a spot on the plaza, and there were some people, again, smoking on the plaza. So I think it's good that we have these fines, but we also need enforcement. I don't want to call the police on somebody smoking on the plaza. But it would be nice maybe occasionally for on events like Tuesday Night Farmers Market that someone would come through and just double check to see if anybody is smoking on the plaza, and at least warn them there is no smoking on the plaza. Please put out the cigarette. So, thank you.
Thank you. That makes good sense, especially because we have an ordinance.
If I can address it, we actually do have somebody in the plaza. We send either myself or Mr. Galvin goes through the plaza on market nights for a couple of hours every week and approach everybody that we see that's smoking. And I have to say, for the most part, we've had 100% compliance, but there's only one of us, and budget allows for a couple hours, maybe a night. So I apologize, but it's just the reality of resources, and we've never had a mechanism to enforce it until this citation process.
Thank you. Mr. Allebach?
Good evening, Fred Allebach, 19550 8th Street East. I hadn't intended to speak on this item. I came for the next item, but Vice Mayor Harrington brought up the anti-scavenging, and I know from my own experience in life that dumpster diving in my younger days was one of the most fun things that I ever did. And the United States has got incredible food waste. We waste 30-40% of the food that we've got. So if there's a dumpster with a lot of good pizzas in there, why should you get fined for basically gleaning off the waste of an incredibly wasteful culture and have that be a problem? So that reminds me of the Grapes of Wrath, where they would run all the Okies out of town for people who just didn't happen to be townies. So that I think that a scavenging fine should not be very high, because these people are like, if you look at nature, you have vultures and scavengers, and they play a role in the ecosystem. So that if you have a municipal ecosystem that generates a tremendous amount of waste, but then you don't let anybody scavenge on that, you're not really having a good ecosystem. So I think that is sort of like no camping, other things in town that aren't allowed. It just kind of makes Sonoma an unfriendly, unrealistic place. So, I remember when I was younger, I still got a minute and 20 seconds, that I discovered that if they sell it, they throw it away. So if you want some carpet, go to a carpet store dumpster. If you want, and also anything that they sell, you can get. So you can become a gleaner, and with agriculture, they let people glean in fields where there's leftovers. So, but then there came a point in U.S. history where they started to lock the dumpsters, and put fences around them so you can't even get in. So I guess if there's a dumpster that's not locked and that's open, it should be fair game for people to go after it, and not have a tremendous fine against that. Or I don't know who would complain about somebody getting that. Though the one strategy that dumpster divers did have was to order like 8 pizzas and not show up, but then go to the dumpster later and see if the pizzas would be in there. But I hadn't planned on speaking on this item, but I thought that, and I have a little jet lag, and feeling a little punchy, so I thought I would come up and use my 3 minutes to make some public comment on the scavenging, and I hope the fine is not that much.
Thank you, Mr. Allebach.
I can clarify that. Although I like the pizza idea, I may actually use it one of these nights, but it's actually only destroying, scattering, or collecting recyclable materials without the consent of the owner. So it's not garbage. It's recycling materials.
Yeah, and it's interesting, actually, in San Francisco, people buy food and just put it on top of mailboxes and garbage cans so the homeless can have food. So it's kind of interesting how they've evolved themselves in this respect. So, but thank you, Mr. Oliva. Is there anyone else? Seeing no one coming forward to the podium, I'll close the public for public comments. The staff, is there anyone who responds? David.
Yeah, since the mayor put me on the spot, I've been on the council for 6 years, and I've made the comment a lot that we pass all these laws and we don't enforce it. That's true. But in the last 6 years, we have got our act together, and I think Bob Smith has done a great job so far. I love the presentation today. I know that it's taken time to get there, and there's some issues with the tree. And I guess my biggest question before I vote to approve is I'm sure that there must be another code that has something to do with trees other than this. And I think that's one thing that was missed in the presentation, that this is just probably an overlap of something else that already exists, unless I'm wrong. And the reason I bring that up is because I would like to make a resolution after my colleagues. But I do want to say that on our illegal vacation rentals, on our smoking, on a lot of things that we have passed in the last 6 years, that I was very critical of passing those until we had a system in place. I think city staff has done a great job. I think Bob Smith, you've been doing a great job, and I appreciate it. And I know that we're doing contract services out there for the illegal vacation rentals that I would like to see it at a zero. For the city of Sonoma, so we can have housing. I think that's where there's probably 75 to 100 families that could be living in the city of Sonoma if we were 100% taking the illegal vacation rentals. So thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Sorry, I also have a question about excavating and grading, the fines for that. Are there other provisions for people that do excavating and grading to disincentivize that, or what are they?
The excavating and grading section has to do with, as you might well imagine, by my recollection, is unpermitted grading and excavating of properties and lots. So it's a penalty. You'd still have to go back and get a permit for it, but it's a penalty for actually doing it.
So the city can, let's say you do some excavating and grading that wouldn't be allowed, you could be fined, and then also the city could make you put it back the way it was beforehand?
Yep.
Oh,
And we would red tag you. We'd
Okay.
stop you from doing any further work.
okay. I don't have any additional comments, and I support these fees.
In answer to the previous question, under Chapter 12 relating to trees, there's also a provision that says any person who violates the chapter, removal of a tree, is liable in a civil action for the appraised value of the tree.
But who would bring the civil action?
It says brought by the city attorney's office, but so
Oh.
there's another opportunity for the city to get, in the case of a tree with a high value dollar, that could be substantial.
The damages or the value of the tree?
Correct.
Okay. All right, looks good. Good job.
Yeah. Mr. Edwards?
So, in adding to the tree issue, which I agree with, we also have a tree committee, but my understanding is that if a tree is 20 feet off of the street, you can do whatever you want with it. And I have an issue with that because if it's an 80-foot tree, you can see that from 6 or 8 houses away. So I think we need to strengthen our tree ordinance and maybe find a mechanism to get the tree committee, whether it's CSEC or bumped up to council level when it's a particularly older tree, and to replace a tree that's been growing for 150 years. How do you place a value on that?
Great
when you add the
idea.
millions of gallons of water and so on that it took to grow it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question and a comment. So on garbage collection,
Right.
that What does that entail exactly?
If you're looking at, there's two provisions in there. One of which has to do, garbage can placement is something, believe it or not,
Oh,
we get
yep, see
a
that
lot of complaints about garbage can placement. It's surprising how distressed people get when their neighbors leave their cans out more than 24 hours. Garbage collection has to do with, I believe, contract services for actual garbage collection. I'd never seen it come up, ever.
Got it.
I can look it up for you, though. I
No,
really
I-
feel badly because I read all these things. I thought I knew these things all
Oh, I'm
along.
just
And then I go, oh, yeah,
curious.
right, what is that? But like I said, most of them we deal with, a handful of these regularly. The rest of them are just nice to have them there in case.
Cool. Well, I think this looks like a good starting point. Probably after it gets started, you might feel that some needs to be adjusted. I think I'd still bump down the anti-scavenging to a little less, but I'm also prepared to accept these as they are. And I agree that it probably is time for us to reconsider our tree ordinance in whole as council.
Any other comments? So with respect to that, the city manager, I guess you've heard, with respect to the trees, and what, does it look like the council wants to, is making a suggestion? Do I hear a suggestion with respect to the tree?
So, changing a review of the tree ordinance hasn't really been agendized appropriately tonight.
Right.
So again, this could be something that we could look at our quarterly and figure out when we could look at that. I agree, looking at our tree ordinance, it's something that staff has talked about as well. So it would be a good thing for us to do. But I think it's a matter of kind of looking at timing of when we can do that. So tree ordinance would be fine. The only other piece I want to mention to the council is, as Councilmember Cook said, this council approved in our budget this year an ability to contract with a firm that actually does very sophisticated monitoring and review using Google Analytics, et cetera, of vacation rentals. And there's a couple of companies that do this. A company that's been selected by, I think, Napa and Petaluma, they've had really good success, and really, because I think this is a computer business, and it really they provide the information that then goes to code enforcement, and code enforcement can then follow up with those folks that are not following our vacation rental ordinance. And we can fine, et cetera, and try to get them to be compliant and get the past TOT for that time period as well. So I think this is an additional tool on the vacation rental. Then I think we'll then let Bob and Patrick Galvin, our code enforcement officer, be efficient and effective with their time.
So the only reason I brought up the issues of the trees is just to ensure that you've made a note of it. And thank you. I know that. Mr. Cook?
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve the resolution as said.
I'll second.
May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Cook? Aye. Vice Mayor Harrington? Aye. Councilmember Henley? Aye. Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
On to 6.4.
Consideration, discussion, and possible action to adopt a resolution revising the special events policy and rescinding Resolution 07, 2015.
All right, Mayor Agramonte, Council, I'm happy to introduce Lisa Jansen, who's joining us at the table. Lisa is our contract special events manager and manages all of the events that occur in the plaza and Depot Park. And under Lisa's initiative over the last almost 9 months or so, has been working through with the CSCC, with our staff, conversations with council members, kind of looking at how do we update our special event policy. And and if council recalls, we had a kind of a study session on this back in April. And the policy that was brought to you at that point was also reviewed and worked through with the CSCC. And so there were a variety of kind of questions and items that council had then. And so with that, we'll kind of turn it to Lisa to go through and give you an overview, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. like Kathy said, in April, we brought to you a proposed changes to the special events policy, and my goal tonight is to discuss those items that you had highlighted in those, and hopefully have captured the comments in the discussion that you had during the April meeting in the new revised special events policy. So staff recommended the formalization of the existing policy. We're on the application permit process review that reads, the CSCC may allow the review of large-scale recurring events by the special events manager with or without interdepartmental review by the SEC, provided zero violations of the special event policy were indicated during the previous post-event review. And under council discretion in April, staff has gone back through, because you asked for specific examples. You didn't want to leave it open, and there was some concerns about interpretation. And so what staff has done is we've gone through and we've added a level of detail in the policy, but examples of such changes that would warrant a secondary review by the CSCC or losing that good standing status would be violations of public safety conditions, violations of the special events policy, impacts on plaza businesses that were not expected. Gosh, am I echoing? Sorry. That were not expected during the initial review process. In addition, we also outlined in your packet a list of conditions that are put forth by the SEC. So for all large-scale events, we would continue to review them with the SEC, and those conditions are listed, but they're everything from bathroom crowd monitors and necessary bathrooms, porta potties on site, etc. So just to give you a little bit more details, and if they didn't adhere to those special conditions, that would be another reason why they would be bumped out of that good standing status that we discussed in April. In addition to the violations of the conditions of approval, as stated in the special events policy, if alterations are made to the event that are not communicated to the special events manager prior to the event, it would warrant the event losing its good standing as well. So those last minute changes that might occur, trying to really eliminate the element of surprise, they would lose their good standing status as well. So just making sure that the communication between the event organizers and the special events manager and the city is always open. There's some language in the policy that addresses that as well. One of the, in addition, it was raised that there were some concerns with how do we report back to the CSCC on those events that have received the good standing status and have been approved by city staff, which, going back to that just quickly, what's being proposed, the new process would be staff review. So I receive the application, I receive the supplemental documentation that supports the application, I review it, I would meet with the SEC members, the SEC would then review it, put the list of conditions, at which point then I take it to the city manager for her to review as well. And if there's no concerns or other issues, then it would get that good standing status and it would be approved administratively by city staff. Not all events would qualify. Remember, it was a 2-year term that they had to be in good standing for a minimum of 2 years. But in addition to that, we're looking at putting a summary together for the CSCC twice a year. The summary would include the calendar of events that are scheduled and those that have been approved, as well as sharing the approved applications and supporting materials with each member of the CSCC. So giving them a link to all the documentation so that they'd have access to it as well. So moving forward to the post-event review and the CSCC input, in addition to the approval process, city staff recommended changes to the post-event review process, eliminating the requirement for events in good standing, that 2-year period, to attend a post-event CSCC review. During the April meeting, we discussed ways to capture feedback from commissioners and the city council members that could be included in the creation of the post-event report. In essence, closing that feedback loop. Since our discussion, I've been sending out emails, but it's an online survey asking for your comments and feedback, any information that you could provide regarding those events that you've attended, as well as I've also reached out to the CSEC members for their feedback, and that information will be collected and included in the post-event report. We've also asked for if any person has communicated a concern or an issue to forward their information on, and I will follow up with them and get back to them and also report back to you on my follow-up with individuals and their concerns. If a significant issue arises, actually, sorry about that. So that will wrap up the post-event and kind of close that feedback loop. Also gathering more information from not just my and the park supervisor's event, walkthrough of the event, post-event, but also capturing CSCC and City Council comments. And then moving on to Section 3, which is the prohibitions. In lieu of the Council's comments in April, we have eliminated the inclusion to allow some inflatables on city-owned property. And we have added the ban, the use of the Mylar balloons at events occurring on city-owned property, and that's been added to the special events policy based on your feedback and comments.
Is that supposed to say in light of?
In light of?
Not in lieu of.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. In light of. Sustainable, the next item that I think drew the most discussion in our, well, has always been pretty much the highlight of our topics in our CSEC discussions, but also in the April, the initial meeting in April of the special events policy changes have always been around the sustainable environmental practices and the ban of some plastics. And so during the April 16th City Council meeting, city staff included the additional restriction requirements and guidelines for sustainable environmental practices. We kind of blew it out. We put some guidelines in our documentation in addition to our waste minimization form. And with that information, our goal is to really help educate event organizers in advance of their event to be prepared to try to eliminate the use of certain items, change how they think and how they implement their events, rethinking the use of, signs on site, lots of signs, maybe using one big sign instead of a bunch of little ones, rethinking how they handle water distribution, etc. So those are all outlined in the sustainable practices documentation. But in addition to that, based on our discussion, there seemed to be some support for a complete ban of all single-use plastics at events taking place on the city-owned property. Below, I have included an overview in your staff report, but if City Council would like to ban the single-use plastics and have it go into effect on March of 2019, we have some processes outlined. The four components that we looked at that really, I think, are the hurdles that we had to overcome based on our discussion with the special events managers back in December of 2017, and then carrying that discussion up through the CSEC through most of the spring and early summer. There are four components. One is first finding the solution for the replacement of the single-use water bottle. Second is an inexpensive replacement for the plastic beverage cups. A lot of our events serve lots of beverages and we have a tendency to use a lot of plastic cups. Third was the replacement of the food containers, and last, the replacement of plastic utensils. So when it comes to single-use water bottles, one of the concerns with the elimination of single-use water bottles was how to provide water to large crowds of individuals in a timely and inexpensive fashion. For large-scale events, event organizers have many options. They can rent a large water monster. They could purchase a water monster and then reuse it. But those water monsters cost anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000 to purchase. We are in discussions with a local entity and are hoping to find a local source that will rent a water monster type of device for all of our events locally, and hopefully in a more cost-effective manner. So with that said, we're also looking at once you have the water, where do you put it? So there's a couple different options. Obviously, a paper cup always works. Paper without a wax substance on it is always best, except when you're trying to reuse it for water. So with that said, we're looking at some options and some sourcing for some refillable water bottles as well. And there's some discussion with this local entity that might step up and help with that. The other item that came up was the reusable plastic beverage container. Reusable beverage containers can take on many forms, from paper cups to stemless wine glasses, glass pints, stainless steel pints, and stainless steel wine cups. This year at the Sonoma City Party, we chose, for many different reasons, to implement a stainless steel wine cup and beer pint. In doing so, we eliminated, it was almost a 4-to-1 plastic to paper. So for every beer that was poured, that reusable beer pint was used about 4 times. So we eliminated 4 extra plastic cups going into land use. Now with that said, stainless steel has a lot of, there's a lot of manufacturing costs. It has to travel. Most stainless steel products are coming from China right now. And so there are some costs associated with it. But with that said, in implementing this plan for the Sonoma City Party, one of the things that we did is, one, we set up a pricing structure that encouraged people to reuse it. So they weren't just buying additional stainless steel cups just to have. And then the second item is we actually marketed and told them, hey, look, bring it back to next year's event and you'll get that discounted beverage price. So our goal is to really encourage individuals who are attending our events to either bring their own drinking container or buy one and reuse it during the event and hopefully bring it back to the next event and reuse it again. In regards to food containers and plastic utensils and those items, the goal is really to find a source, identify sources that are that will work within our composting and recycling facilities that we have in place. But there's a zero waste task force that is actually doing this right now for other events and other cities within Sonoma County. And so I've been in discussion with them, but trying to find reliable sources that are somewhat inexpensive, that are environmentally friendly, and then putting together a document that we can encourage our event producers and their vendors to adhere to in selling, as they're serving or selling beverages and food at our events. But that's really kind of the plan that we have in place as far as the elimination of the single-use plastics at our events. If the City Council decides to implement a ban on all single-use plastic, city staff will need to determine how best to enforce this ban. Staff expects to focus on the education process of it. As we heard earlier with other bans we have, enforcement is always an interesting point and something that I think we're going to have some errors and some missteps, but by our event managers and our vendors, but I think we have the ability to remedy the situations and remediate it and make a successful change for our future. So at this point, the staff recommends that we see how the March 2019 ban unfolds, and if there is a need for broader enforcement tools, then we'll come back to City Council in the future. The next item is the promotional banners. We had asked for additional banners to be placed on the front historic lawn the day of the event, setting the size and asking for them to be professionally made. And based on just general feedback, we have removed that, and we have some other thoughts in mind, but I will discuss that at the end of the report. But that was based on I think there's other areas that we can do this and adhere those signs so that they're not intrusive to our historic front lawn. And then additional items that were raised during the special events policy and discussion. The following items were brought up by City Council to be considered in the city's capital improvement plan, including upgrades to the garbage enclosures in the plaza, removable metal bollards to be installed in the front horseshoe, and then looking for a solution that maybe that's where that sign goes, is on the front bollard and not necessarily on the front lawn. But the bollards would be nice because it would be a more permanent, even though temporary, but they were able to withstand impact and probably a better solution to keep crowds safe and close down the horseshoe while we're having events and while people are gathering in the front horseshoe. And then I guess at this point, all those items that I just mentioned will take into consideration in the future. And then at this time, next steps, I'm happy to elaborate on any of the special events policy questions you might have. But like I said, the red line document and the items that I've highlighted are those that seem to have needed a little bit more clarification based on our April discussion.
Any questions from the City Council?
I have a question. I thought I read, although it might have been in a different report, so help me remember this, that about taking the fee setting for the farmers market away from the CSCC and giving it back to the council. Was that in this or was that in something else?
So, Councilmember Harrington, that was included in the revisions of the special events policy and are still in the red line document. Unfortunately, I think what your printout is not red. I think it's all black, but you'll see that it's changed. All those, the fees for the farmers market were included during the contract negotiations because that is a contract that happens between the city and the farmers market.
So because we're doing it, because we redid the contract, it's not necessary any longer? Is that the thought?
Correct. So we set the fees when we did the multi-year contract with Farmers Market. We set the fees within those contract parameters. And so therefore, the event still comes back, and correct me if I'm wrong, the event still comes back and is reviewed by CSCC for the operating parameters. But the fee piece, because it's a unique event, we handled via the contract and is already taken care of through the term of the contract.
Okay. Can you just remind me, that contract is 2 years? Or?
I think it was 2 years. I was just trying to remember that. I think we have one, I think it goes through 2019.
I was just thinking, when I was on the CSCC, we went over the farmers market fees and we had the opportunity to go much more in depth than we could go as a city council. It was actually a pretty thorough examination of the fees. So I guess at the time it comes up again, we'll have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I think it's a pleasure of the council. I think, if when we're looking at what council's direction at the end of the term for the farmers market, which I believe is 2019, there is, the council's direction was to do an RFP process. So we'll need to bring that forward sooner, some point if it is 2019, some point, kind of summer-ish, in order to kick off an RFP to have a vendor selected in time. And so if council wanted to, involve the CSCC on the front end of determining or helping put any of that together, that would be a time, probably a spring conversation.
Oh, well, let's put that on the calendar.
Well, does anyone have a question? I do, but I'll wait.
I do. So just to confirm where we are tonight, these 4 areas of the single-use plastic ban, those are incorporated into the draft policy update that we see today?
Yes.
And back in April, we had already talked about straws, and that's still in there.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Thank you.
So my question is, when I can't remember the event, I'm sorry, but there was a 4 water dispenser, it was hooked up to the city hall. So what was that?
So that is actually the device that we're looking at creating and utilizing for our events here in the city of Sonoma. Like I said, there's a nonprofit that has reached out and is interested in creating this device. But really what it is, it's like a countertop. Sorry, I almost knocked my water over. It's a countertop, it has taps that come out of it. It hooks up to our city water via a drinking hose, and it has a filtration system on it, and it pumps right through. And as you go to fill up your bottle, it gives you many opportunities to fill it up. There's 5+ taps, and we're looking at having more than just one. So.
Yeah, I thought I was really impressed by it. It doesn't look real fancy, but it
works.
really did the job. The other thing I wanted to share with everyone was our visit with Leslie Lukacs. Yes, and from the Sustainable Material Management Consultant. And I have to tell everyone, you were way ahead of the game, because she said, Annette, well, yeah, we're doing that, we're doing this, and we did that. So I was really impressed with the information, and I think you have continued possibly to confer with her on these issues. I was just impressed. I think they have high standards, and you were right there discussing them with her.
Well, I think this is actually a really great time to acknowledge the fact that our special events managers and the organizers of all of our events here in Sonoma Valley have gone to great lengths to try to meet the CSEC on many of these initiatives, and are starting to actually implement way before this has received your approval. So it's kind of nice to be with such forward-thinking group of like-minded individuals.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Edwards?
So my family and I were up in Seattle this weekend at the Seattle Zoo, and they have a zero waste and compostable program in all their food service and so on. So it might be an avenue to take a look at what they're doing up there with.
I've been told
their
Seattle
products.
has one of the best composting facilities in North America.
Yes. So I mean, it was great, and in the facility, they had all the, you put your food in one bin, you put your plastic or your
Right.
compostable plastic in one, and I think the cups that are used there are compostable.
They
I'm not-
are based on their composting facility that they have in Seattle.
Gotcha.
There is one being planned for this Sonoma County.
Yeah. Because if we can get that, I think we'll be a lot further ahead, but we should look into that. But one of my concerns is that when you have reusable cups and people are pouring a beer and you put the tap right into the beer and you're drinking somebody else's beer, it doesn't sound very appetizing to me.
So one of the items that I've looked into, especially for the city party, was I reached out to the public health department, and at this point they don't actually have regulations on how best to pour reusable glass, but they'll be working on it throughout the winter and hope to have something rolled out to all of us
Right.
this next spring.
Thank you.
You have something?
Yeah, on the composting facility, because I had heard too, is it Recology that's considering finally getting back into the proper facility that would get hot enough to compost vegetable plastic? One of our garbage experts.
You know, Rachel, I'm not sure if it's Recology. There's a task force that was cited. It's the Zero Waste Task Force, and Leslie is a huge proponent. I think they just got approval, but they really should come and do their presentation for you, because it was fascinating.
And I think that they are going to be coming. The Waste Management Agency would like them to come to all the cities so they can explain exactly what they're going to be doing. It's a multi-purpose facility, so it's going to be really interesting.
One of the other things, because I do travel a little bit, is in Germany, when you go to a fair or a market, there's always a area where you get real glasses, and when you have coffee, you get real cups and everything else, but you're in a contained area, and you're not just walking around. You can walk around with your mug, but then you take it back, and that's just how they do things there. So it might be something to think about with some of the events to encourage that kind of beer garden kind of facility for people to go and have their drink.
Yeah.
Lisa, can you just remind me? I know we talked about having a mandatory, I don't know what the term is, like a recycling manager or recycling company trash sorters come. That's part of it. Is that going to be mandatory in 2019, or what's the status of that?
So all but one of our events has it, one of our large-scale events. So all of the large-scale events except for one, and it really comes down to a cost situation. We're trying to find a solution that'll work, and I've been reaching out to individual entities here in the Valley to see if we can't put together a partnership or some sort of program where maybe they get work credit or something. But
is it mandatory or not? Like in our policy, is it mandatory that somebody have that?
It's listed as a preferred, I believe. I'm not quite sure it says mandatory.
Preferred practice?
I think it's a preferred practice.
Can you tell me what
and I
that is, just so I
apologize.
can see it?
Sure.
Thanks.
Actually, I'm going to pull out my blue line.
On one of these, page 12, it says they have to have a recycling sorting plan in place.
Yeah, that's number F, or letter F, sorry, under solid waste. Sorry, I'm just.
Because I know when we were talking to the farmers market 2 years ago, I think we informed them that we believed it would become mandatory that you would have to hire a company to sort the recycling. Is that what it's called? What is it called?
We call it a sorting
Okay, all right.
company.
Yeah. And so I'm
we're
just
listing
wondering.
it as conditions, Amy. It's been conditions, but I'm not seeing it. It's suggested in here that
But
large scale
should we
events
make
have
that
it.
mandatory?
I guess my only concern is for the one event that comes in that doesn't have the budget for it. It's running about $1,500 plus.
What is the event?
Celebration of Mexican Independence Day.
Well, could it be waived? I mean, can't we waive it? Can it be the rule and then you waive it for some reason?
I believe the requirement. You'd have to build in a process for that waiver somehow. And then that's sort of, I don't think we
It
can do
seems
it this evening for the
problematic.
process.
Right?
There are, I will say, service organizations that provide this particular service for the right, I don't know what the right is, to sell the recyclable materials that they collect as a result. In Martinez for events in one of their parks, they're currently, the city has currently contracted with the Sea Scouts, which is an arm of the Boy Scouts of America, that have a facility located in town, and the Sea Scouts come and collect the recyclable materials, off-haul them themselves, and actually sell them and keep the money that they collect, and they're paid a small stipend by the city to do that. So there may be some options that could be examined with service organizations or youth groups that may be interested in gaining some money that way that would be less expensive than the commercial organizations that do this work.
Yeah, I don't want to burden small events, but I really would like to see that be kind of codified as our policy that you're supposed to have a process, whether it's that you've trained your own volunteers and that they're going to do the sorting for you, or you're going to hire a sorting company, but that we, that it's more than a preference. Because I know we've heard so much about people, what do they call it? Aspirational recycling. And I'd like to see us recycle as much as actually possible and have it actually get recycled instead of just wishful thinking.
Yeah, we do know that from having the sorters hired, especially at farmers market, it has made a huge difference in terms of just the amount of recycling and just cleaning up after the event, et cetera. That's really reduced the amount of city parks maintenance time that our staff time spent. So it's been very effective that direction. So if that's so as we continue hearing and maybe go to public comment, if that is an area that the council would like to see changed, then you could potentially make that as part of your motion as a friendly amendment. And we could create language to wrap that in if that's the wish of the council.
Are there any other questions? Oh,
Sorry, I apologize. I'm not sure I think it's necessary. If you do look at page 11, section 13, under solid waste and recycling, the title of that section, lead into that section, says all event applicants are required to submit a recycling and solid waste plan. And then number F of the plan says, outlines a post-event sorting plan of trash and recycling. Now, I admit that it doesn't say you must do it, but it must be in your plan as to how you are going to address that. So I think it's covered, and in order to approve the plan would have to address that issue in one way or another.
Does following your plan have any effect on your standing for the next year? So it would.
Yes, it would.
Just in terms of the plan, what the requirements would be, I'm just trying to think back to our farmers market discussions. Didn't we have some percentages of recyclables that were like without a sorter, like it was like 4 times more. There was some numbers that we talked about that were like how efficient it was with the sorters.
It's significant, the amount of recyclable materials that is pulled out of our trash.
I mean, I guess I'm
And
wondering.
it's
Sorry, go ahead.
it's amazing to me how much trash is pulled out of our blue bins too. It goes both ways. So really having an individual or an organization that's actually going through each can and dumping it out and pulling it out and putting it in. I think currently Mr. Clean categorizes, I want to say 7 different types of trash that he pulls out and puts in different, like separates. And it goes everything from, dirty food, paper with food on it, to clean paper, to cardboard, to aluminum, to plastics, and etc. So it's broken down pretty significantly.
Well, I wonder if we can just have a cheat sheet that we could steal from somebody and stick on here to be clear about what we expect to be done at the end, instead of just a plan that
Meets these requirements.
yeah, or accomplishes the following, or reduces their waste by X% or some ascertainable standard, so it's clear what we're talking about. Because it seems like it's preferable to have them hire the company if possible, since they know how to do it and have people and stuff.
Yeah, I do think it's been pretty night and day to have a professional group of folks that know what they're doing do this. I think we could, work with some volunteers, but it's not likely to be as effective. Now, maybe that's okay as folks are learning, and maybe there's a different education process as well. But, I do think it's worked really well to have the professional. And, some of these, we've got some of these events have been around a long time, and some of these events are still kind of growing. And so trying to work through them a little bit. But if council, with what's here, and we can add a little more language, maybe just to be clear that we, what the outcome is.
Page 12. Okay.
So maybe we can think about this a little bit as you maybe go out to public comment, unless council has any other questions. And
Large-scale events are required.
There aren't any more questions or comments. Okay, we'll go out to public for public comment.
Logan Harvey, 578 Estimadera Drive. This is awesome. I think that this is really, really great that this is what council is doing. I think that the CSCC did a great job of providing really good information for everybody to go through it. I think staff did a great job of listening to what a lot of people in the environmental community were saying to them, and council did as well. And so I'm really excited to see this go through. I know I heard David at the last meeting that we talked about this, talk about how much he dislikes plastic, and so I'm excited for his vote on this. I really appreciate your comments, Vice Mayor Harrington, to really kind of focus on the way that the waste stream is handled going forward, and how that's handled for our events. I'm chair for Sonoma Valley Democrats Environmental Committee, and I can speak on behalf of that committee. We've been working to try to make this happen. We've wrote letters to pretty much everybody here to support this, and we're really excited to see this go through. One thing I would say is, it may be a good idea to kind of provide examples to vendors as far as what they can purchase and where. Providing direction always makes these kinds of transitions a lot easier. I thought that the city party went excellently. There was no different taste in my beer nor my wine when I tried it out of the stainless steel cups, and they look great and they're reusable. And I think just kind of promoting the sustainability is a great message to send to our community. I think you'll probably see people in the park that after they're going out and buying food and seeing reusable things being used on that, or compostable things being used, maybe they'll kind of have the foresight to bring that when they bring their own food to the plaza. And so just kind of alerting people of what is possible is just a really, really great idea. With the water and the water monster, absolutely do that. But also, I know Rachel kind of pushed through a water refilling station previously, and putting another one or two on the plaza may help alleviate some of the concerns of having long lines at water monsters and things like that. So just putting them maybe not so close to the kids park this time would be a great idea to go for. So I'm really, really excited to have this go through, and I think everybody's done a really great job here, and this is just a great example of what's possible when we we come together. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Good evening, Council. Again, I'm also very excited to see this come along. About 8 or 9 years ago, when I first started with the City Services and Environment Commission, we were just banning styrofoam products. And that took several years before all the vendors finally got the message that styrene and styrofoam products weren't to be used at events. We spent several years talking about taking plastics out of the events, and most of that conversation started with the waste streams and complaints from the event organizers who really struggled to pull recyclable products out of the waste streams, out of the garbage cans. As you heard tonight, and the sorting could be quite terrible. And most of the folks really try to do a good job to do their best. But again, you know, like you had mentioned earlier, some of the smaller events, some with the smaller budgets, they really struggle complying with that. So I think really getting rid of single-use plastics from these events would be good. I know from personal experience, I go to events that are much larger than anything held here in Sonoma, and if you don't bring your own cup, fork, and plate, you're not eating or drinking. Those events are a little rougher than I think our crowd here in Sonoma would like, but you know, I think there are some great solutions. The city party with the stainless steel cups was wonderful. And also for the event organizers, the important thing to remember, this is an opportunity for a revenue stream for them. You know, if they're selling the cup that says their event name on it, or it has the City of Sonoma logo on it, it's an opportunity for these nonprofits to make a little money for their cause. I really hope that you put this forward on the single-use plastic ban. The other thing I'd like to take an opportunity to talk about is the farmers market fees. You know, there's an opportunity within those fees to enact the Food Action Plan and really provide some opportunities for lower income folks to have fresh fruits and vegetables. I really hope the City of Sonoma can find an opportunity to provide that. I thought a few years ago when the CSCC was coming up with those fees that we had some good thoughts along that plan. I'm hoping that maybe you can go back and look at that and find ways that the city can support some of our lower income folks to get good fresh vegetables and fruits. Thank you.
Good evening again, Fred Alabak at 19550 8th Street East, and I would like to compliment Lisa for being very responsive and city staff for being very responsive on this issue. And I think that's one of the really nice things about Sonoma being a municipality of 10, 11,000 people is that you can, you know, really get something done. And this is a good example of thinking globally and acting locally. And I've noticed that the council in the past has made unanimous decisions on environmental issues. So I think this is another issue here or situation where the council can have a unanimous decision and show forward progressive thinking on this issue. And like there was with the plastic bag replacement, at first there was some uncertainty. People didn't quite bring their new bags. They kept forgetting. But now bringing your own shopping bags is just totally normal. And I was just in New Jersey and no one's even heard of it. And you couldn't believe how many plastic bags were everywhere. And it was just almost obscene. I couldn't believe it. And I mentioned it to a couple people at the supermarket and they were, wow, that's a good idea. So I think that this plastic ban and sustainability and recycling of the special events is something that will come in just like the plastic bag replacement did. That this will be something that will turn out good. And I'd also like to second Chris's comments about the farmers market with the fees and to try and find a way when the city negotiates the fees to bring in some kind of price break for people with EBT cards or some way that would you know, bring some social equity to that, because it's good food, it's good stuff, but a lot of it's really too expensive for people. And so making that more available is what sustainability is all about. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Alabak.
David Eicher, 1110 Level Court. I think we should send Lisa on a field trip to Seattle. So,
What's the other one in Europe? Germany.
Next to Germany.
Forget Seattle, I've been there.
Anyway, I've attended a number of the vintage festivals and the Salute to the Arts over the years, and used to get the their glasses with the logos on it. And I asked, well, can I bring this back next year? And I was told no. So that I had to buy a new one each year. So it's good now to hear that I can bring them back and reuse them. So that's great. So I do have a question. The Govina glasses, are they considered single-use plastic? Because they are washable and can reuse them, but when I see them being used, they're almost always being thrown away. No one takes them home and reuses them. So I think that's needs to be looked at. In terms of getting a professional sorter, people do not know what goes where. I attended the other meetings on this and learned a lot about what's recyclable, what's compostable. And so, I get things at home and I look at this and, oh yeah, this is recyclable. And then every once in a while I was like, is this paper? Does it have plastic film on it? What is it? So you do need, I think, professionals. It's very difficult to try to teach somebody that. I think this is a great start, but we'll need to continue this afterwards because of restaurant takeouts. You get plastic containers from restaurant takeout. Although Whole Foods, in their hot food, they do have compostable boxes that you can put your food in. So you take them home, then throw them in the composter rather than having more plastic. And also, I try to remember, take your bags back to the grocery store. I try to remember to take my plastic containers back to Whole Foods or Sonoma Market to reuse them myself. But it'd be so that's an idea that's going to be really difficult, I think, to try to get people to do something like that. But I think this is a great start, and let's continue until we don't have any plastic. I remember when I was small, and we go to restaurants, you have leftover food, you get boxes. You go to a fast food restaurant, you get paper in boxes. There was no plastic involved. You even had paper straws. Remember drinking paper straw, using paper straw on McDonald's milkshake. Yes, it would collapse, and you need to get a second one. But, hey, I made it work, and I drank that milkshake. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliveck. Sorry, Mr. Ehrlich. I can't believe I forgot your name. I'm closing the public session. I wanted to give you some information, and I'm remiss because I do sit on the Sonoma County Waste Management Agency, and I have answers to some of the questions that were posed here. First of all, Oliver's, aside from Whole Foods, has a wonderful recyclable. I think they were talking about that at Waste Management. The other thing is they do accept DBT cards at the Tuesday market. That's a wonderful thing. But the name of the company that is going to be working on all of the compostables and all of the recycling is, and it was voted on last month, is Renewable Sonoma. They competed against Cold Creek Compost and others, and they were actually the ones that rose to the top. And their number one effort, which will no longer have to be the burden of the Waste Management Agency, is education. And that's exactly what they say is lacking in Sonoma County. So they will be at all these events to be able to, so you don't have to go as I do. I don't know. I wash these things out. I don't know if that's good enough, but I just want to let you know. So it's Renewable Sonoma, and I apologize for being remiss in mentioning that to you.
Well, I'll go ahead and start. It is kind of funny how far we've come. I wish that there was something that showed all the things that the council has done, for the last 20 years. Because sometimes you read the newspaper that we're no-do councils and all this. But if you look, the first thing that we were smart, this council, talking about the Sonoma City Council, was to hire someone like you, Lisa, who I remember before you were here, where the CSCC was the one out there enforcing things and calling city council members like myself saying this and that. Because it all goes back to local control, and I always talk about local control, and Logan Harvey was correct. I hate plastic. The first environmentalist in the world was a farmer. And sometimes we get beat up as farmers thinking that we're not environmentalists, which is just the opposite. Because if you look at my family, 4th, 5 generations, they had milk delivered in glass. The glass came back. Since I've been sitting on the council, and I had a nice discussion with the city manager today, how people put spins on different things. And the problem when you put spins on something, you can debate and you can make your side look better than the other person's side, then they can put a spin on that. Because I have been told by people like the Go Cups, it takes water to wash them, so you might as well have throwaways, because then you're not wasting water, which doesn't make any sense to me. But I am for the mandatory sorters. I think that should be part of this resolution. If you want to ever have fun and you're at a weekend, go to Whole Foods and watch people try to find out where the recyclables go. It's kind of like a fun game. Some people just give up and take it with them because they just have no idea. So with that said, I hate to hear the word cost. When people say, well, nonprofits, businesses can't afford that, the cost to the environment. I told myself I wasn't getting on the soapbox tonight, but I guess I just climbed up on it, so I might as well go. I remember sitting here at the council, and I wanted a plastic ban in Sonoma. We started doing all the work. Well, big light bulb went off. The county's doing it. So then, now the city doesn't have to do it because the county's doing it. Then another light bulb goes off, a whole bunch of them, that the state's going to do it. I'm horrified every time I go to Safeway because the plastic got thicker. But now it's recyclable plastic because they put that in there. And the reason I bring this up is because I want to remind my colleagues on the council, staff, and the public that local control is very important. Because local control is when you can be part of your destiny. You don't have the county say, well, Go Cups are this, Go Cups are that. We make those decisions. We make those decisions with the mandatory sorters. I don't like having a plan without having an enforcement of that plan. Because I've been on the council long enough, and I've been a human being for 53 years, I think. I think it's 53 years. It's how old I am. I've been a human being the whole time. Don't want to get that started. Got to be careful with this crowd. But I lost my train of thought. But anyway, I will be supporting this, but I do want to remember, and let's not say cost to the, let's not cost to, what the cost is when we have to look at the cost of the environment. What I would love to see, to go to Safeway and just have, or Whole Foods and everywhere else, and just have regular paper. Whatever happened to paper? And somebody mentioned paper straws. When I was a kid, we used to drink Pepsi, and we'd bring it back to Santa Food Market, which you're from my same hometown, and they would give us money back. And I remember Mom would be mad if we broke one because that meant that we weren't getting our 5 cents or whatever it was. So with this, I wholly support it. I would like to see us go a lot further with styrofoam. I would like to see all this in due time. I understand that we can't just change the world in one little thing, but I will be supporting this.
Okay. Well, I also support it, and I think we should add the language about having a professional sorter. I think that it's clear the difference is significant enough that we probably just need to have that for our events. And for a small event that can't afford to do it, we should just help them figure out the funding and, be partners with them to make it happen so that we can do what's best. I just wanted to say, different people have asked about what the, and I know it's something we're going to work on, but like what the mission of different commissions is and what it should be and what the CSCC is going to do, especially now that we have an events manager that's doing some of the work the CSCC used to do. And I think that this is a great example of what should be done, which is setting policy, pushing things forward. I think the plastic bans, a single-use plastic ban is fantastic. It is a good opportunity to have a much deeper dive into a topic than we can really achieve here because we have so many things on our agenda all the time. So kudos to the CSEC and to Lisa and the staff for putting together a thoughtful proposal and moving this forward. It reminds me 2 years ago, just prior to getting on the council, I was on the CSEC and we did a bunch of work around trying to figure out how to push Climate Action 2020 forward after the Riverwatch lawsuit, and then the city council sort of took up that issue and then passed it, and we are still the only city in the entire county of Sonoma to be on Evergreen. We have 100% clean power, and so I think this is great, and I'm sure future improvements will be made as well, but just really, I think that's, as a process, having the CSEC really chew through things, come up with thoughtful proposals, working with staff, and then having them come to the city council is very helpful. And thanks for doing that.
So I'm going to support it as well, but as I'm sitting here, I'm looking at this piece of plastic that I just took my cookie out of, and I'm looking next to my fellow council member with her little plastic thing. So one of the things I'd like to start with is getting rid of little plastic things that we open up. Every time we come to a meeting here, we are telling people that they shouldn't be doing it, and we're sitting up here doing it. And I won't say anything about that or your plastic thing there. So anyhow, but I think that with the sorting, I think mandatory sorting would be great, but I think it's a great opportunity to teach a scouting organization or somebody to get one of these groups to say, all right, we're going to teach X people, 2 or 3 different groups, how to do this, how to do it properly. And then if we spent the money on providing the containers, and when we remodel the garbage container we have in the back, that's where we could store all that stuff and make it so it's efficient and becomes a recycling station rather than just a garbage holding station. So you mentioned Sonoma Clean Power. I can't remember where I was with my kids. They were handing out all these little plastic things that say Sonoma Clean Power. You can get it on everything. That would be a great thing for this council to push back to Sonoma Clean Power and say, stop giving that crap out because it doesn't really mean anything. So
I will mention that.
Thank you.
I will be proudly supporting this tonight, and I think the CSEC and our special events coordinator, is that the right title? Lisa Jansen, have done an amazing job, and it's encouraging to see the plastic straw discussion is happening across the country, which is fascinating, and I think that this is all a part of a culture shift, and this is a huge step forward. I think after everyone gets used to this, then we'll push a little bit further. I definitely agree with Vice Mayor Harrington about maybe being more specific about the expectations about sorting. And only partially related for special events, I feel like the next big piece is going to be figuring out how to get people to our events without driving in their cars by themselves. So I'm just going to put that one out there, and otherwise I'm really proud to be voting on this today.
One additional comment with the folks up in Seattle, I don't think there was a venue that we went to that actually had a straw in a public park or that sort of thing. So my kids have just gotten used, and they don't like paper straws anyway, so they just don't use them anymore.
So I was looking for the name of the Riverwatch dude, because I know I sat through a lawsuit for months on the Transportation Authority with respect to that, and it turned the whole state of California upside down, as we all know. And I just 2 years ago, I think I realized that this is something that's very important, and I thought just one person can't do anything. But, I really believe that one person can help, and I've learned so much, especially being on the Waste Management Agency board, and if each one of us take that responsibility, I think it's going to be better for us and for our children, for the world. So I'm excited about this and really support it. And, Lisa, I am so happy you're here. I was an event coordinator and fundraiser in my profession, and I just think you're fantastic. And I love the way you say no to people. No. It's like with a big smile, and nobody ever has any retort or anything. It's pretty amazing. So I just think, and when you were there with that Leslie Lukacs, who is really a pro, and you were ahead of her. So she was very, very impressed. I hope you've stayed in contact with her, because she was really, and I hope she doesn't steal you or something. But I really support this. Thank you, and thanks to the council for all. Seems like everybody wants to support this. There is a resolution, is that right, somewhere in here? So if somebody...
Can I just ask a question? So with regard to additional language on the sorting, how will we do that?
So I just wanted to point out there is one little additional piece on page 12 under recycle that is very stated in a mandatory language. Large-scale events are required to have a recycling sorting plan in place for their event. But again, it references that as a plan as opposed to an outcome-driven.
I think I like it to say that they're going to hire the company or
Set standards, maybe you can just reference like a minimum threshold of like the expectations, which is a separate document that could be referenced, and that could be not have to be figured out tonight.
Well, if the plan is, I mean, I think we could say overall relative to this plan that the plan is subject to the review and approval by fill in the blank, and that way, and shall meet minimum thresholds as established. We could do that, unless you want to try to establish those minimum thresholds here tonight.
No, I want to approve it. I just don't want to leave it open because I want it to be clear. It's not large. It's events on the plaza are going to need to do this. And I assume that if you hire one of those companies, they give you some number, like if you hire us 40% more, I'm sure they have some numbers. The question being, then does it become Lisa's job to audit the success of their garbage collection? I mean, who's going to do that?
I want to ask Lisa a question here because I'm hearing council wanting to have a professional sorter. A number of you have mentioned this. Staff has always talked about this for large scale events. Okay. And Lisa can tell you the number of large scale events we have versus smaller events. We start to move to smaller events, and that may be, I want Lisa to comment, that may be more than we can do, or that we should do maybe, because maybe the smaller events.
Maybe you could just define it. What's a small event?
Yeah.
So currently, a small event is anything less than 8 hours and only requires the use of one section of the plaza. So with that said, let's say I'm doing a baby shower, and I want to reserve a section of the plaza and invite 30 of my closest girlfriends, then that's a small scale event. Or a small scale event could be,
plein air.
Or it could be I'm renting out the back section of the northwest section of the plaza, and I'm going to have an author come and speak. And I'm going to invite 600 people to it. But I'm not selling any food or beverages, but they could if they wanted to.
Well, we
It's an
can just stick
interesting
to
dilemma.
large-scale events for the time being, although it seems like it should be the number of people that attend and whether food and beverages are served, not, I mean, that's the definitive.
So I
measure.
think if council wants to add that for large-scale events, those requiring more than 8 hours, which typically have food and drink, and they've got a setup, and they've got booths, those types of things, and then I believe in this section 12, we would add language, if that's the pleasure of council, to say large-scale events are required to have a recycling sorting plan and utilize a professional recycler sorter. So that, I do think that would be clear, because and then, again, it's taken us, it's been 18 months of working with the large-scale events as they've learned and worked through this. And then we can start to set standards for some of those smaller-scale events, and we can do some teaching, and we can create some, different tools, et cetera. So I think that would be staff's recommendation.
Could we word it as a trained sorter rather than a professional?
Or professional or professionally trained sorter.
Professionally, whatever, yeah.
The Boy Scouts you were talking about, is that a professional sorter?
It is not.
Oh, it's not.
Okay, but Amy, for clarification's sakes, Red and White Ball, the catering company meets with the students that are volunteering and walks them through how to sort all that trash appropriately. So in that case, they're being trained. They're not professionals, but they are being trained. So the language does kind of matter here.
Professional or trained sorter, how about that?
Yeah, so I'd like to go ahead and make a motion as the resolution is read and adopting the language. And my motion, take it or leave it, would be that it would have to be a find out some kind of certification. At least we have minutes on this, because I liked what Councilmember Edwards said, that a local nonprofit could get certified. I'm sure there's a certification that you can get, or with highly trained that would be looked at the next time. Because I just don't want this to be talked about tonight and then just go away and not happen. So I would like language in there to kind of mimic what I just said.
Well, I think professional or trained. Is that okay?
So if I might, for the maker of the motion and the second, on page 12 under recycle, you currently have the words under the first bullet, large-scale events are required to have a recycling sorting plan in place for their event. We could add or change it to large-scale events are required to have a recycling sorting plan and use a professional or trained sorter for their event.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
So that's a motion, and but it was different, so.
Motion, and Gary shook his head, and so I think we took,
For
that
the
was a
second-
that was a
for the
staff
second
amendment
time
that
that
they
David
both.
said what? Okay.
So I think
Just
we have
wanted to make
agreement
sure.
on
I
the first
agreed
and
with
second.
what the lawyer just said.
I just wanted to make
I don't get to
sure
hear
we
that
get a
often.
little speed.
Veronica, can we call you the lawyer from now on?
You absolutely may. You can pretty much call me anything.
May I have a roll call, please?
Yes, and just as a clarification, I do get a refill every time, but. Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Henley.
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you all. Thank you for your participation with respect to this. 4, at this point, I think we're very close to the end of our meeting, and I don't see dedications in here, but I do want to remind everyone that I dedicated this evening to Bernadine Ada Friedel, her nickname Bernie, and they said, well, people just said she was wonderful, and I know she was. Thank you, and now we're going on to council members' reports and comments. Are there any? Mr. Cook?
Yeah, I just want to say one. I had a GSA meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I want to thank my colleagues, the council, the city council, for approving. We're going to go ahead and have the where all the entities will be paying for a couple more years until the GSA figures out if there's going to be a taxation on wells or how all that language is going to be used.
Thank you. Anyone else? None? All right, then we're going on to city manager comments and announcements.
I just have one brief announcement, and that is to remind folks that the first Sonoma Art Walk is starting tomorrow. So if you just go to sonomaartwalk.org, it starts, I think there's a ribbon cutting at 5:15 at Sonoma Valley Museum of Art, and then from 5:30 to 7:30 there are over 20 different locations. The website is fabulous. It's got a great map, so you can look and see the different retailers and restaurants and folks that are partnering to basically have art be exhibited, and it's different kinds of art. So from music to performance to a variety of different things and art. So it's a collaboration. I don't have a list of all the folks, but I want to thank the chamber who's been kind of leading and putting this together, the museum, and I think there's 4 or 5 or 6 different organizations that are putting this, and there'll be three times, so September, October, and November, kind of a beta trial. So as council knows, you all supported it, and so hope we can all go out and enjoy it, support our art community.
Thank you. On that note, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for being here. Yeah.